to this place, you may notice some very distinct areas where your body is speaking to you. So instead of trying to resist those spaces, move into them. So allow your mind, whether it be your knees or your ankles, or maybe your lower back or your hips, wherever you feel that first kind of awareness of, wow, this is really tight. Just notice what happens if you allow your mind to move into those spaces and become very consciously aware of where you may unintentionally be kind of holding on. And just try to slow down your breath. Oftentimes, when we find resistance in our body, we find ourselves moving to a very short and shallow breath. So what happens if you bring your breath deeper into your lungs, so the lower part of your lungs? And what happens if you allow your exhalations to start to lengthen rather than trying to rush for that next breath in? And as you stay with your mind in this space of where tension was highly visible or palatable, what happens the longer you stay aware of it? And if you feel that perhaps you've released a little, start to notice if there's another area that holds the tension. And allow your mind to move into those spaces of where you feel your body unintentionally gripping, unintentionally holding on. Notice what your breath is doing and see if you can take your breath deeper into your lungs. Slow down the breath. And create a sense of ease in the breath. And notice what starts to happen to the area of tension. Our breath is linked to our body. And sometimes it can be the body. It's kind of like that chicken. What came first, the chicken or the egg? Is the body becoming short and shallow in accordance to the tension? Or is the tension causing the breath? But perhaps you can see that with awareness of the breath and awareness of the space, we can use the two together to create more ease. So as we move through today's practice, we're going to move between a lot of different things. We're going to use techniques, drills to create strength in your quads and hamstrings. And we'll use both shortening, so where the muscle is in a shortened position, which is what we typically do when we think of strengthening a muscle. We strengthen it in a shortened position, kind of like bicep curls or hamstring curls. But we're also going to work with eccentric contraction, which is where we're engaging the muscle as we lengthen it. And I find this to be one of the best ways to reactivate a muscle that has kind of forgotten how to do its job. And the hamstrings and the quads are two very typically short and weak muscles. So we'll use eccentric work, and you'll know what that is in plenty of time, to kind of create more length. We will also, of course, use some stretching. So it's these combination that kind of create stability, because we get the muscles to do what they're supposed to do, which is to activate and relax. So from here, go ahead and shift forward and remove the block from underneath your hips. We're going to sit back on our sit bones. Bring the block straight out in front of you. And then if you have the sliders, you're going to put them off to the side, off the mat, to where they're about shoulder distance apart. Take your feet and set your heels on the sliders. Again, if you don't have sliders, socks on a hard floor work. Socks on a carpet will also work. We're going to lean back. So not putting a lot of weight on your wrist, but just in a position where you can relax. So flex your ankles, pulling your toes back towards your shins. So this is a dorsiflexion. And just start by straightening the legs and drawing the heels back in. So as you do this, you're pressing into your heels. So it's not just a slide. You are pressing down through the heels to push the legs forward. And then you're pressing down to pull the legs back. And you may already start to feel a little bit of an action going on in your hamstring muscles. So when we push out, we're concentrically, so we're shortening the quad muscles. And we're lengthening, we're eccentrically working the hamstring muscles. So this is kind of getting both of them. The next time you push out, stay out. Really pull your toes towards your shins. Firm your thighs so much that you can lift your heels off the ground. So this is a shortening of your quad muscles. This is a concentric contraction of your quad muscles. So they're shortening, at least at the knee. Press the heels down, draw them back. So we're going to switch to one side at a time. So keep your left knee bent. Straighten your right leg out. Press the back of the knee down. Pull the heel off the floor. Lift the leg. Take it over the block, tap. Lift by pulling the toes towards the shin, lift it up and take it back. Bring it back to the slider, pull it in. Lift the heel off the slider. Bring it down. Straighten the left leg, so push the heel down as you push it out. Pull the toes towards the thin thigh, feeling the thigh muscle engage. Lift, take it in and over. And I know, again, I probably make this look really easy. I practice this a lot. Push down, bend your knee, drag your heel back in. Lift your heel off. Press it down. So we're going to continue to do that. So slide out, firm the thigh, lift the heel, lift the leg, pull it over, take it back, press the heel down, drag it in, lift the heel, push the heel down, other leg slides out, pull the toes back, firm the thigh, lift, take it over, lift, push down, drag it back, lift the knee. Take the heel down, press it out. So we're going to do this the same one more time. Lift, over, lift, over, draw it back, lift the heel. Press it out, firm the thigh, lift, over, lift, drag it back, lift the thigh. All right, so we're gonna add on. Push the right foot out, firm the thigh, lift, take it over, take it back, push down, drag back, lift the heel. This gets hard. Straighten the leg. Hold. So really take your toes towards your head. You're gonna feel the hamstring, not the hamstring, the quad really engage. Bring it down, set it down, press it out, firm the thigh, lift, take it over, lift, drag it back, lift the heel, straighten the leg, push the heel towards the sky, toes towards your shin, bend the knee, set it down. So if any of this ever gets too hard, just reverse to what we were doing before. You can, instead of straightening the leg, you can pause here and just hold, or you can straighten the leg and hold. Bend, down, push, firm, lift, tap. There's a little hip flexor, but the quad is also a hip flexor. So the top of the quad is a hip flexor. That's what straightens your legs at the top, but you'll feel a little catch in your hip. Last time, each side. Firm, lift, tap, lift, tap. Push down through the heel to drag it back in. Lean back, lift the knee, straighten, push through the heel, take your toe towards your head. So you really want to feel the front of the quad. Bend, push it out, firm, lift, tap, lift. Push down through the heel to drag it back, lift the heel, straighten the leg. Really work on straightening the leg. So the more you firm the thigh muscle, the straighter the leg will get. Bend, press it out, take the feet forward and shake it out. All right, so we're gonna go to the foam roller now. So most of that was quad. It was a little bit of hamstring activation, but you'll feel more hamstring activation as we go. We're gonna go ahead and release the quads. So to do that, we're gonna start with the top of the quads. The top of the quads attached to the fronts of your hip points. So those two bony points, they attach there and go down to the fronts of your knees. So we're gonna start with the uppermost attachment first. So come over and bring it right in your hip crease. So where those hip points are, you'll feel kind of the front of the pubic bone on the foam roller. You'll feel the hip points kind of on the top of it. You can stack your hands together and rest your forehead on your hands or your fist. And just allow yourself to sink in here. And it may help to bend your knees and kind of swish your feet side to side like windshield wiper. You may get a little bit of tenderness on either side. Kind of stay on that tenderness. If you find it more on one side, stay on that side. And then just straighten and bend that knee. So we're starting with the upper quads, mainly because I have more tension closer to my knees, and I just assume everyone else does too. But usually I start at the side. So whether that be closer to the pelvis or whether that be closer to the knees, I start where it's less tender. So go ahead and come up onto your elbows. You're gonna roll forward so that we're now getting into more of the belly of the quad, of the rectus femoris, which is that medial quad. Toes tucked under. Breathe into your rib cage. We do want to have some core engagement here, so don't just let your lower back fall towards the floor. And lift the navel towards the spine. Toes tucked. Just start to rock at the top of your quads. And we're rocking as we walk the forearms forward. We want to find where we actually have a tender point. So just keep on moving downward towards the knees until you find a place where you find some tenderness. We don't want the tenderness to be intolerable. Once you find that place where you're tender, pause there. And maybe it's on both legs, maybe it's on one of the legs. You want to do one leg at a time though. So start with the one that's less tender. Keep the toes tucked under on the leg that's more tender. You're just going to bend and straighten the knee on the less tender side first. So this again is that pin and stretch of the quad. And then once that starts to lessen as far as tenderness goes, switch to the other side and now do the more tender side. And then once that starts to lessen, make sure your core is engaged. Take both knees up, not far, and then just kind of roll side to side. So shimming your hips side to side, and your knees will, or your heels will windshield wiper to the other side. So now going more into the lateral and medial quads. And if you find there's a tender spot there, you can kind of go to more than what the side that is tender and straighten and bend that knee. So if we release the less tender spots first, as we move down the quad, it'll kind of give it time to perhaps lessen this tenderness. So walk again forward until again you find a more tender spot. And as I said, as I get closer to my knees, I definitely get more tender. Make sure the core is engaged. Once you find the next tender spot, keep the more tender leg straight as you work the less tender leg first. Bend and straighten. Make sure you're breathing. Remember the experience with the breath. If we're doing those short, shallow breaths, we are creating more resistance in our body. So when you find yourself fighting stuff, try to work on your breath. And then if you haven't already switched to the other side, switch to the other side. Good. And then come up towards the knees, lift the hips just slightly. So you're kind of in a pike position with your butt. And just get a stretch right at the tops, or I guess the bottoms of your quads where they attach to the knees. And then come back. Doesn't that feel lovely? All right. So we're going to come onto our backs. Actually, we're going to come onto our bellies first. You'll need a block. Come onto your belly. Start with your forehead stacked on your left hand. Kick your right heel towards your hip. Bring your knees together or as close together as you can, and take your block. Take the short end of your block and kick your heel into your block. And then position the other short end of your block either on your glute muscle or your upper thigh. And don't start by squeezing too heavy. Just squeeze to the point where you can keep the block there and then stack your forehead on both of your hands. I'm just going to start to create an awareness of that concentric contraction of your hamstring. So keep the block there. If you feel a muscle cramp in your hamstring, it doesn't mean that something is wrong. It just means that your hamstring isn't really used to actively acting in a shortened position. It most definitely is more like when we're seated, we definitely have our hamstrings in a shortened position more so than not, but we're not actively using it. So in this position, we're actively asking the hamstring to engage while it's short, which can create a cramp. So if you are cramping, just use the breath again. And keep your forehead on your hands. Start to press the top of your left foot into the floor. So left leg is strong. You want to find that active quad again. So the harder you press down through your left foot, you'll feel your quad engage, the front of your thigh engage. So keep the left leg active as you try to take the right knee off the floor. So now we're going to get a little bit more hamstring activity. We're still holding the block between our hip and our heel. And see if you can hold it for 3 more breaths. And go ahead and release it. Remove the block. Straighten the leg, tuck the right toe under, press the heel back to lift the knee. So get a little stretch of your quad and your hamstring and your calf muscle, which might have come into play there. Then again, take both of the fronts of your feet down into the floor. Kick your right heel towards your hip. Press your left foot into the floor. Lift the right knee off the ground. Kick the heel closer to the hip. Flex your ankle strongly, and then try to push your foot up towards the ground as you straighten the right leg. Push your heel up towards the sky. This is the hamstring working in eccentric contraction. So it lengthens to straighten the leg and lift the leg. Release. Bend both knees and shake the hips side to side. Hamstring work is never fun. Can often be frustrating, but stronger the hamstrings are, the looser they get. And hopefully as we progress through this today, you'll start to see some of that. Straighten both legs. Keep your forehead on your right hand. Bend your left knee. Take your block. Press the short end of your block into your heel. If you don't have a block, like just squeezing your heel towards your hip is enough. Take the other short end and either press it on your glute or your upper thigh. And then just hang out here. So if you don't have a block, you can try using your foam roller. It might be hard, but if you put it between your calf and your thigh muscle, you may get some activation there. Just stay and breathe here. And start to press the front of your right foot down, lifting the kneecap off the floor. You'll feel the quad engage. Keep pressing the right foot down as you lift the left knee off the ground. So heel, block, and thigh are still connected. And the longer you hold, you may find a little bit more activity in your hamstring. Super fun, just stay with it. One more breath, let it go. Remove the block. Straighten the leg, tuck the toe, firm the thigh, lift the leg off the ground, the knee off the ground. And release the knee back to the ground. Kick the heel towards the hip. Point the toe up towards the sky. Press your right foot into the ground, firming the front of the thigh, and then lift your left knee off the ground. From that little interesting feeling you feel in your hamstring, use that to straighten your leg up and back. Right leg still pressing down. Release. Bend both your knees and shake your hips side to side. Good. Come up. Grab your foam roller again. We're going to start with the knee portion. So usually I feel in my hamstrings it tighter, closer to my hips. So I start in a less tender position. So with the foam roller right in the back of the knees. Turn your knees out a little bit. So we'll get where the hamstrings attach to your lower leg first. So just start to bend and straighten your knees. So touch your heels to the ground and then straighten your legs. So this is penning and stretching the more distal, so the further away from the hips portion of your hamstrings. And I personally feel this more on my right hamstring, which is usually my leg that gives me issues. So I just find that interesting. And then to get the inside, we'll do one leg at a time. So bend your right knee out to the side, roll to where the roller is behind your left knee. And then just kick your heel out and in and stretch. And then switch. And then come back, both knees. Lift your hips off the ground and just start to rock forward and back. So now we're doing that exploration again. So with this exploration, we're looking for a point where the tenderness is in the hamstrings. And once you find it, again, you can kind of bend and straighten your knees. So just getting that stretch. And for the uppermost portion, I'm gonna scoot back so you can see me. You don't have to. We're actually gonna come up and sit on it. So where this is positioned right now is right below my sit bone. So in the meat of the hamstrings closest to the sit bones. And maybe depending on your flexibility, you have to lean back on your hands. Maybe you can start to lean forward. So just kind of notice where you can go. And then you're just gonna sink in. All right, so go ahead and release the foam roller. Have a block close by and have your strap. So your block is going to be close to your foot. So go ahead and bring it with your feet together. Bring your block outside of your right foot. And then lie back. So start first with some quad or hamstring stretch. So flex your ankle and wrap the strap around the ball mount of your right foot and straighten your leg long. I want you to move to where you can actually straighten your leg. So if that's way behind your hip, that's fine. If it's closer to the floor, that's fine. If it's closer to your head, that's fine. But move to where you can straighten your leg. So really work on using your belt to pull the toes closer to your head or towards your shin. And then start to press the heel up towards this guy. So as you press the heel up and you pull the toes down, you'll feel this firming of the front of your thigh. So keep the front of your thigh firm and straighten your left leg to the ground. So toes are pulling towards your shin, heels are reaching either towards this guy or towards the wall in front of your left foot. So both quads are active as the hamstrings lengthen. Bend your left knee, release your right foot to the block. If you don't have a block, just bring it to the floor. It's not a big deal. So your right foot is up on a block. Hands down beside your hips, lift your hips. So right foot is on the block, lift your left knee towards your chest. So left knee is towards your chest. Bring the hips down towards the floor, press your foot into the block, lift the hips. So continue to do this. With the foot up on the block, you're gonna get a little bit more activation in your hamstring. With your foot on the floor, you're probably gonna feel more in your glute. So just do this 5 to 10 times, pressing down to lift. Left knee stays bent towards your chest. Couple more times. Next time you lift your hips, stay lifted. Keep pressing the block either into the floor or into the block, or the heel into the floor of the block. And then lower the hips down. Straighten, or keep your left foot on the ground. Straighten your right leg, taking the belt, wrap it around the ball mount of your right foot. Straighten the left leg down. Pull your toes towards your head. Reach your heel up towards the sky or towards the wall in front of you. Toes pulling back towards your shin. Use the belt, or use both hands on your belt to keep your right leg straight. Firm your left thigh and lift your left leg up beside your right leg. Keep the thigh firm, and we're just going to do a few hip lifts or leg lifts here. And in this position, the straighter the leg is, the firmer the quad is. This is a quad lift. You're actually using your quad to lift the leg up. A little bit of a hip flexor, but more in that quad acting as a hip flexor. That is what we're doing, is hip flexing the hip. One more time, keep it lifted. Keep holding your right foot. And as you lower your leg, flex your ankle super strongly and slowly lower the leg to the ground. So now you're using your quad as control to take the leg slowly to the floor. So we get that eccentric contraction in the upper quad. Good. Bend the right knee in towards the chest, release the belt. And switch. So take your block to the outside of your left foot. Bend your left knee in, wrap your belt around the ball mount of your left foot, and straighten the left leg up towards the sky. Pull the toes towards your head. Firm the front of your thigh. You want your leg to be straight. So we are contracting our quad muscle with the hamstring in a lengthened position. So if you can't have the heel over your hip, take it further away from your hip, but just work with where you can have the leg straight. Straighten the right leg to the ground, pulling both of your toes up towards your knees, heel stretching either towards the sky or towards the wall in front of you. So super strong quads. And bend the left knee, bend the right knee. Take the left foot down to the block or to the floor. Hands down beside your hips. Press your left foot into the block, right foot into the floor. Lift your hips, so coming into a bridge position. More weight into the left foot. Lift your right knee towards your chest. And we're going to do some bridge lifts. So hips drop towards the floor. And then press down through the block, trying to resist the urge to grip your toes. So we talked about that last week. So use more of the soles of your feet pressing down than the gripping of the toes. And when the block is lifted or the foot is lifted on the block, you get more of a hamstring connection rather than glute. Glutes working in both. But with the block lifted, you get more in the block or in the hamstring. Next time you lift, hold. Really press down through the foot. Relax the toes. And slowly release the hips to the ground. Right foot to the ground. Bend the left knee in towards the chest. Again, grab the belt. Wrap the belt around the ball mount of your left foot. Stretch your right leg long to the ground. So as you go between using your hamstring muscle and then straightening it, are you noticing that you have a little bit more space in your hamstring? And if you firm the front of your thigh more, as if the muscles are hugging around the leg bone, do you feel that the hamstring releases a little bit more? So both toes pulling towards the knees, heels reaching either towards the sky or towards the wall in front of you. Keep your right leg super strong, lift the heel, and then lift the leg. And we'll do those leg lifts a few times. The stronger the leg is, the front of the thigh is, the less work you do in the core. So this is hip flexion, but the main muscle that is creating the hip flexion is the top part, the top attachment of your rectus femoris, which is that medial quad muscle. Lift the leg up. Flex the ankle strongly and lower it halfway. Hold. Both ankles reaching, flexing, heels reaching. Release the leg to the floor. Bend the right knee. Release the left knee. Move the block out of the way. And we're going to go back to the sliders. This is super fun. You want to come to where your hips are at the edge of your mat. So come down to the bottom of your mat and bring your feet onto sliders or socks and lower back down onto the floor. Bring the hands beside the hips. Lift the hips off the floor. Clasp your hands beneath your hips and snuggle your shoulder blades closer to your spine. Keep your left foot where it is. Slide your right leg out. Flex the ankle, push the heel into the floor, slide it back in. Keep the right foot where it is. Slide the left foot out. Push the ankle into the floor, flex it, and then slide it back in. Stay lifted, right leg pushes out. Slide it back in. Left pushes out. Push the heel down to slide it back in. 2 more each side. And it doesn't matter how high the hips are lifted, you'll feel this in your hamstrings regardless, which is what we're going for. Pull both feet in, release the hands, lower the hips to the ground, pull the knees in towards the chest. Rock a little side to side. If you have a block, grab your block in your right hand. Take the block and place it. Left foot can come to the floor. Place your block, the wide part of your block, behind your thigh. The closer you are to the sit bone, the less of a stretch it is. So the higher you are towards your knee, the more of a stretch it is. Start to press the back of your thigh into the block as you straighten the leg above your hip. If you don't have a block, you can use your hands and just press the back of your thigh into your hands. Straighten the leg. Press the heel up towards the sky, toes towards your head. Bend the right knee, switch. So take your left knee in towards your chest. Bring the widest part of your block behind your thigh, taking your fingers on the short ends of the blocks. The closer it is to the knee, the more of a stretch it's going to be. So the closer to the sit bone, the less of a stretch. Start to push the back of your thigh into the block. If the leg straightens here, it's fine. If it doesn't, no big deal. We're just working on kind of that awareness of pushing the hamstring into the block to create more of an eccentric contraction. The hamstrings actively pressing either into the hands or the blocks. Release. Roll to either side and come up. Come on to hands and knees. Sit the hips back, heels towards your, or hips towards your heels, forehead either resting on your hands or the floor. So a little break in child's pose. This is stretch for the quads. And it's a stretch for the upper part of the hamstring. So the hamstrings attached to the sit bones. Good. And come up. So you can fold the front of your mat back towards you. So you have a little bit more cushioning for your knee. And again, we're going to use those fun sliders. So either socks or a slider. If you have the blocks, you want the blocks on either side of your slider. If not, you can use the seat of a chair. So hands either on the block or on the seat of a chair. Bring your right foot onto your slider. Take it slightly forward and flex your ankle. So your right toes are pulling up towards your shin. Left toes tucked under. Start to straighten your right leg or move towards straight. And then pull the heel towards your hip. So we're just kind of going further away from the floor, doing the same kind of actions. So the more you press the heel down, the more you get that shortening of the hamstring as you draw it in. And the more you push it down as you straighten the leg, you get that eccentric contraction of your hamstring. The next time you go forward, stay forward. Start to pull your toes closer towards your head. Firm the front of your thighs. Draw your right hip down towards the floor. You can stay on your blocks and gently start to fold forward. So now we're getting a stretch of your hamstring. Once you reach that barrier where you feel like if you went any further, it would be too much of a stretch, kind of hang out right before that barrier. Keep pulling toes back towards your head. Keep firming the front of your thighs. So the more active your quad is, the more the hamstrings relax. So it's actually called reciprocal inhibition. We create a contraction in the opposing muscle to create more length in the muscle that's short. If at any time in this you feel that you can go deeper, you can take your blocks down or you can bring your hands to the floor. But notice if that right hip hikes up, you want to keep the outer hip pulling down towards the floor. Quad engaged, toes pulling back. You can start to slide the leg forward a little bit. You'll feel more of a stretch in the hamstring. Maybe the attachments at the backs of the knees as well as where it attaches to the sit bones. Keep the front of the thigh firm. Notice if you're sagging in your left hip, keep it in neutral. So hug the left hip in as you draw the outer right hip towards the floor. And then climb back up to your blocks to the highest level. Shift back to where your left hip is directly above your left knee. Pull your toes back towards your shin. This is challenging. Suck the top of your leg bone into your hip socket and lift your right leg off the ground. Good. Bend the knee and stretch forward. So now we're stretching the quad and the back leg. So press your right foot down, all 4 points of your foot pressing down, and draw your right heel back. Tuck your left toes under. Kick left heel towards your sit bone. Tap it down. Kick heel towards hip. Tap it down. Kick. Tap. Kick. Tap. So they're shortening, concentrically contracting your left hamstring. Next time you bring it up, hold it. Really kick the heel towards your hip. Kick, kick, kick. Notice if the right hip pushes out, hug it in. So keep that Right outer hip drawing down towards the floor and back towards your left heel. Kick a little closer. Tuck heel down. Firm the front of your left thigh to lift the back knee off the floor. So now we're going for eccentric. Hover the knee above the floor. Reach to the heel, straighten the leg. Hover the knee. Reach. Hover the knee. Reach. Hover the knee. Reach. Hover the knee. Drop the knee. Walk the right foot further forward. Kick the heel towards the hip. Point the toe. Reach back with your right hand. Grab the front of the left foot. Now pull as close as you can. And if you can't grab the foot, you can continue to work on that concentric or the shortening of the hamstring, the strength of the hamstring. The strength of the hamstring is what actually gets the heel closer to the hip. Release. Bring both knees to the floor. Sit back on your heels. Fingers to the floor. Lift your knees off the floor. Push your knees down. Reach your hands back. Lean back to where you can comfortably, and then lift your hips. So squeeze your glutes to lift your hips. Lower the hips down. And let's do the other side. So blocks onto the sides. Bring your left foot onto your slider. Right toes tucked under. Slide the left foot forward so you can flex your ankle. So toes pointing up towards your head. Notice if your left hip is hiked up, bring it down so that your pelvis is more in neutral. And then as you drag your heel back, push the heel into the floor and drag the heel back. Press the heel down as you push the leg forward. So both the hamstrings and the quads are working in this in both ways. So as you push the leg out, the quad is flexing, strengthening concentrically. So it's shortening as the hamstring lengthens. So it eccentrically engages. And the opposite is true on the other way. Next time you come out, stay out. Start to walk the hands slightly forward. Outer left hip draws down towards the floor. Don't push the right hip out to do that. So the hips stay in neutral. You more fold over. So you're going to find your resistance point where you have that nice stretch in your hamstring. The more you firm the front of your thigh, your quad muscle, the more the hamstring is going to relax. So keep pulling the toes towards the shin. Keep hugging the front thigh muscles to the bone. And then deciding how low can your hands come to the ground without the hips moving out of neutral. And without pushing through a barrier. We don't want to tear a hamstring. We want to go right to the edge. So it should feel like a really easy stretch, but a very active muscle. And again, you can play with your breath. So if you notice that you're holding your breath or that you're breathing shallow, what happens if you adjust your breath? And then start to build the blocks back up. Coming into that highest level, back up to where the knee is directly above or below your right hip. Start to suck the top of the leg bone, left leg bone, into the hip socket. Firm the front of the left thigh and lift left leg off the ground. Like, that's not easy, in case you're wondering. Bring the knee to the floor. Walk the hands forward and start to come now into where we're stretching the attachment, the top attachment of the quad, the rectus femoris. So lean forward, get that nice stretch, and then start to kick heel towards hip. So tap, Flex. Next time you come up, stay up. Really kick your heel towards your hip. Notice if either of your hips is cocking out to the side, hug them in. Left foot is pressing down into the floor. Toes are not gripping, but heel is pulling back towards your mat as your right knee is pushing forward. Bring the heel a little closer to your hip. And then tap the toe down from the front of the right thigh to lift the left knee off the floor. Hover, reach it back. Hover, reach it back. Hover, reach, hover, reach, hover, hold. Square your hips, drop your knee, kick your heel, point your toe, reach back with your left hand and grab the front of the foot if you can. And once you grab it, bring it as close to your hip as you can to now get that full stretch in the front of your quad. Release the foot. Bring both knees to the floor. Sit back, lean back, fingertips to the floor. Lift your hips off your heels. Lean hips down. Come up onto your knees. Toes tucked under. Bring your hands to your buttocks. Start to use your hands to scrape the buttocks flush down. Tailbone to reach down. Hips start to press forward. Keep your hands beside your hips and lean back. Come forward. Lean back. Come forward. If that's super easy, you can bring the arms out in front. Come forward. Again, if that's easy, you can bring your arms over your head. So this is work again for quads and glutes, in case you can't feel that. One more time. The arms are up, bring them forward. If the arms are forward, bring them down. Lean back a little bit more, squeeze the glutes, hamstrings, lift up, sit back. You can unfold your mat. And come to hands and knees. Take a couple of cat-cows. And tuck your toes under. Hover the knees off the floor. Breathe into your diaphragm. And then press back to downward facing dog. Lift high up onto your toes. Firm the front of your thighs. That action should be really apparent now in your body. Firm the front of your thighs and press the top of the leg bones back more. Notice the more you firm the front of your thighs, the more space you get in your hamstrings. Lower your heels towards the floor, only going as far as you can with the knees slightly straight or slightly bent or straight. If the heels touch, can you firm the front of the thighs more and lift the toes? Lower the knees to the floor. Come down onto your bottom and stretch your legs straight out in front of you. Take your left foot, bring it inside your right thigh. You can use a belt for this, but play with seeing what happens without a belt. Lift your left leg up and kind of pull it back into your hip socket. Start to point your toes towards your head. Press the back of your right knee towards the floor. So the leg is super strong. Bring your hands down on either side of your knee. Press your knee down more. Pull the toes towards your head more. The heels may lift, and that's fine. Keep your legs straight and start to walk your hands forward. And working with your breath, noticing, is your breath becoming short and shallow? What happens if you lengthen and slow down your breath? Do you find that you're gripping in areas that you don't need to, like maybe your toes or your outer right hip, or maybe your inner right thigh? What happens if you firm your thigh again and press your knee down? Just kind of playing, like, what happened with what we did today? Do you have more space in your hamstrings? And then coming down to where you feel is kind of your stopping point, and taking 3 more deep breaths. But as you come into your stopping point, keep your legs active. And come up and switch. So left leg forward. Right foot inside your left thigh. Start to press the heel down, take the toes back towards your head. Press the back of your knee towards the floor. If your heel lifts off the floor, that's fine. Take the top of the leg bone, lift it, and suck it back into your hip socket. So the deeper the leg is in the hip socket, the more of a flexion you're going to find in your hip. And then hands down beside your knee. Keep pressing the knee down. Keep pulling the toe towards the head, and just work with how much I strengthen the front of my quad, how much length can I find in my hamstring. And not pushing through any barriers. Our goal is not to get as low as we can go. Our goal is to go to where we find resistance. Use that awareness of how the more we engage the front of our thigh, the more the back of the thigh opens. And how, as we use the breath and move into those spaces where we're holding on and intentionally, can we move safely to a deeper point? And if not, just being present with where we can stay aware. Good. Come up. Bring the knees in, sit the hips back. Bring the hips as close to your heels as you can. So a little quad stretch. And come to a seated position. And thank you very much for being active in this quad and hamstring focus class. I know this one can be really challenging. It's not comfortable to feel muscles cramp, but the more we work with being present and breath and activating in different ways, we work through that, and we have a strength that will allow us